Hi, welcome on board. This is the ninth in a series of video blogs I've done around South Australia. The run that I've got on myself for today is going up through probably one of the best parts of the Murray River. I started off today in a little place called Callington, which sits halfway between the new M1 freeway to Murray Bridge and the old Princes Highway. So it's a road that doesn't get a lot of traffic these days, but still in good condition and a fairly interesting part of the world. From Murray Bridge, I spent quite a bit of time looking around Murray Bridge, down around the old wharf area, and doing a little bit of research on some history with the steam engines and the old steam paddle steamers in the area. And it's a bit of a theme that I'll go through for the next couple of videos, looking at the bottom end of the Murray. From Murray Bridge, I circled around to Maiponga, Mannum, Bow Hill, up to Penong, and back around the back road to Mannum. It's probably one of my favourite rides. The roads are in good condition, the scenery is absolutely spectacular, and as I said, I'll come back in the next series of video clips and do from Bow Hill up to Swan Reach, and then going all the way through to Morgan. This last bit of footage is coming over the top of the ranges down onto the Monardo Plains before heading into Murray Bridge. Murray Bridge is probably one of South Australia's third largest rural towns, sits nicely on the edge of the Murray. Got a fantastic amount of history going back to the 1850s, and as I said, I spent a bit of time looking around at the port area and discovering a bit about the paddle steamer industry around Murray Bridge, and there's quite a few shots of the town, and also a couple of pictures there of the wharf area and some of the floods that took place around Murray Bridge in the mid to late 50s. It's hard to imagine now. There's a few shots of the bridge and some paddle steamers in Murray Bridge, and it's changed quite a bit on the wharf area compared to its heyday in the 1850s to about 1920. The bridge itself was one of the first bridges initially to cross the Murray in 1879, and it was just a road bridge, and then later on they put a railway line down the centre of that bridge. As I said, engineering structure itself is a pretty basic thing, but for the time it was a fairly big deal, and looking at the bridge today, it's hard to see, but it's actually spelt the death knell of the paddle steamer industry along the Murray. And I'll go a little bit further into it at Mannum, but Murray Bridge was an area that at any given time in that paddle steamer area there would be 20 or 30 paddle steamers and barges running up and down the river, everything from grain to timber, and as I said, it was an industry within itself, and the river really was probably one of Australia's first super highways, and that went that way right through to, as I said, the 1920s I should say. This is a little bit of footage coming into Maiponga, another fairly busy river town in its day, and then as the paddle steamer industry wharfed out, it became more of a dairy industry, and it was part of a fairly large dairy industry right along the river from the bottom end of Mannum right through to Wellington before the river enters the Great Lakes. I spent a bit of time poking around a few dirt roads off to one side going down to the river. A lot of camping and ski areas down on the river. The river at the moment is pretty well running at not quite flood levels, but they're fairly high. We'd had a bit of rain in the last couple of weeks, so some of the roads were a little bit on the muddy side, but all in all, pretty good all the way around. As I said, from heading off from some of these side roads, I eventually made my way back onto the main Murray Bridge to Mannum Road, and then took a couple of detours off. There's a bit of footage coming over a little place called Reedy Creek, and from there I turn left, and that takes you up to Mannum Falls. From there back around to parts of the old Reedy Creek. There's a couple of shots there of some railway bridges left over from the original railway from Murray Bridge through to Adelaide, and a fairly interesting part of the world you get the chance, take a bit of extra time and call into some of these places. Well worth a look. I peeled off, as I said, just over the bridge crossing at Reedy Creek and went up to Mannum Falls. Place I'd been a couple of times over the years, and I've walked through the gorge a couple of times. This trip here I cheated a little bit and I parked at the bottom end of the gorge in that car park and walked about halfway up. As I said, we'd had quite a bit of rain in the area, so the falls were running pretty well and there was plenty of water around. Fairly interesting part of the country, and you could easily spend a day hiking around the various tracks. I continued on, as I said, back around the top end of the gorge and then went down to some older parts of Reedy Creek. Most of the dirt roads were in fairly good nick, and as I said, it's just an area I hadn't been to before, so I poked around quite a bit before coming back out and then heading back on the main road towards Mannum, and then going into Mannum via the coast or the river road past the main marina in Mannum. Like so many of the roads around this bottom end of the river, they're all in really good condition, and you can poke along at a reasonably good speed. As I said, I was in no hurry on the day. This road we're on now is main turn off the Mannum to Murray Bridge Road. It takes you down closer along the river. On the right hand side you can look out over the main Mannum marina. There's an absolute monster of houseboats and pleasure craft moored in there, and it's always a busy part of the river. Mannum's river history is quite a lot to see, and you'll see a bit further on in a bit of footage where I stopped in Mannum and had a good look around. But it's hard to imagine that at a time in Australia's history where South Australia was a little bit left behind, we'd been mining copper in Burra and Kapunda and places like that, but the gold rush was well and truly on in the 1850s on the east coast, and so South Australia was trying to come up with ideas to raise revenue, and that pretty well started the boom in the steamboat history along the Murray from Echuca right down to Goolwa at the bottom of the lakes in South Australia. But 1852, 1853 saw probably one of the first boats go in, built in Mannum, and it didn't take long before boats were coming in from being built in Echuca. Some guys had boats built in Sydney and they sailed around the coast and brought them in through the mouth, which would have been a fairly spectacular feat for the times. The Murray in those days, of course, was unregulated. There's no locks, and also coming in from the ocean through the river mouth would have been a bit of a trick, but given all the sandbars and so on. But as I said, an amazing amount of history, and as I said, there was hundreds of boats and thousands of people employed in everything from chopping wood to carting grain. And some of these ports, even in Morgan and Mannum, they were massive steamboat river ports, and with such a rich history. I'd stop for a quick cup of coffee in Mannum, another one of those really interesting towns, plenty of history, heaps of hotels, cafes and parks to pull up and stretch your legs and so on. After that I left, crossed over on the ferries and was heading out on the Bow Hill Road. You take the second main turn off towards the river, Baker's Hut Road, and from there that road takes you down right along the coast. Some spectacular views of the top of the river. This one here is looking out over the river from the top of Baker's Hut Road. From there you travel down to the bottom, and the scenery that we're looking at now, you're pretty well going to ride right along that all the way to Bow Hill. Today's run I turned off at the other side of Bow Hill at Penong and then did the run back into Mannum that way. Probably one of my favourite parts of the river to ride. The roads are in good condition, there's a heap of stuff to see, and it's a really good ride. There's a little bit of footage earlier back on a shot of the floods in Murray Bridge in 1956 at the bottom of Baker's Hut Road. I just cracked a bit of a U-turn and swung around, and there's a marking on the rocks there of the floods in this area in 1956. So you can imagine it's another 20 feet above where I'm sitting on the bike at the moment. And as I said, you wouldn't have been able to see anything from one side of the river to the other than floating willow trees and a few other things. This is the start of that road right along the river, and I'll continue it on. Today I said I went as far as Bow Hill. I had lunch at Bow Hill. Beautiful cafe there. It used to be the old Bow Hill General Store. Burnt down about 10 or 12 years ago, and they operated out of an Atco hut for a few years, and then they've rebuilt this new place. If you really want to stop for a great lunch, this is the place to stop. It's a fantastic view out over the river. They put on a really good meal, and they're super friendly. In part 2 of this video, I'll take it up from the road we're on now to Bow Hill, and then from Bow Hill up to Penong and back around to Mannum, and then the rest of the video will cover from Bow Hill to Swan Reach up to Blanchetown, and then on to Morgan. As I said, I'm covering off on quite a bit of the river history, and I'll try and sort of pop into places along the way that give you a bit of a view of what spectacular countryside this is around the bottom end of the Murray.